Sunday, March 2, 2025. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minute news. Our guest today is a researcher and journalist specializing in exposing disinformation and misleading stories on the Fox News network, which she watches so we don't have to. Her podcast and Substack is entitled Decoding Fox News. Juliet Jeske, welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. Firstly, thank you for your service. I know it's a lot what you do, taking in so much of this kind of right-wing, far-right propaganda. But I want to talk first about how Trump voters are maybe enjoying the deconstruction of the administrative state and siding with Russia over Europe and Ukraine and watching Elon Musk pretend to save the federal budget while Trump cuts taxes for the rich and raids the Medicaid budget now. Are they loving it? Because Fox News seems to be.
Yeah, Fox has basically downplayed the Russia connection. They just say, oh, well, you know, Trump is bringing peace to Ukraine. He's ending the war. That's how they frame it.
No more deaths.
Yes. And they don't really mention Putin and they don't really mention Russia. It's just, and they also keep talking about the mineral deal. Like he's getting this great mineral deal because he's this wonderful negotiator and he can make any deal. And then they present Elon Musk as a savior of the American people and as a selfless, billionaire who just cares so much. They totally, the other phrase that they repeat a lot is, well, he's got so much money. Yeah. So he doesn't need any more.
He doesn't want
any more.
He's working for free.
Working for free. They actually say that, working for free. He doesn't sleep. All this stuff. Yeah. Complete fiction.
Because it's important to remind people that obviously we live in our own algorithmic bubbles. And it's no fault of anybody that the news that they have access to is bespoke. And so what you're seeing on Fox News is completely different to what somebody else might be watching if they have more progressive values. And so through social media, your algorithm kind of seeks you out and you basically find your tribe. That's kind of how it works. The problem with Fox, though, is that so much of what they're saying are lies because they're effectively state television for the Donald Trump regime. I mean, it's not that different to state television in Russia, is it?
No. I've called it Trump state television because not only do they openly praise him all day long, but after the election, they turned into like, thank you for voting for Trump. Thanks for getting out the vote. This is because of you. I mean, they acted more like a campaign. They don't even remotely pretend that they're a media company anymore. It's just straight up, we couldn't do this without you, the Fox News viewer, for voting for Trump. So get out the vote again. And I'm like, this is, if MSNBC or CNN did even a hint of the stuff that I see on Fox, they would be outraged and they'd show those clips over and over again. Like, look at this, monster, this mechanism of the Democratic Party. But that's exactly what Fox News does. And ironically, this past week, they kept referring to other media as propaganda. We literally use that term. Hannity likes to do that quite a bit. And that's who I'm following. That's who I was following last week. And it was just all this, propaganda. And he calls other media state-funded media. So,
I mean, projection is a theme of Trump and his surrogates. And often we can decode what he's saying because he's saying it about himself when he's talking about others. So, hopefully people have worked that out. They've deconstructed the code of translating Trump in real time. But a lot of people don't. They take him at his word. And 77 million people that voted for him, I presume most of them are still absolutely thrilled that he got in and that he is doing such great work for the Republic and that, it's going really rather well. In fact, I think he was caught on a hot mic a few days ago asking a journalist to kind of report that what he was doing was really, really good. I mean, that's the kind of level of the propaganda. So maybe we could just talk to those viewers for a moment and voters. How do you think that they're processing this? I mean, do you think they have an inkling that we are currently in a constitutional crisis and potentially on the brink of war? I mean, it is quite that serious, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't think they realize it at all. I think the weakness that I'm starting to see just on social media, the cracks that are starting to form, are more about the economy. It's people worried like, well, why aren't prices going down? And he doesn't seem to be doing anything about prices. It's not just that they're not moving, it's that he hasn't done anything about it. And he's only said, well, I'll impose tariffs, and tariffs would raise prices. So I haven't seen anything internationally, like our foreign policy. I think they're completely in denial. And I think most Fox News viewers just think, well, he's going to bring peace and we won't have these pesky wars anymore. And Europe can just deal with this themselves. Because they're fed lies all day long. They repeatedly say on Fox that the United States has sent far more money to Ukraine than Europe has. And that's just a blatant lie. Just a blatant lie.
Yeah, Europe is 300 million. The US is 180 million.
Yes.
300 billion versus 180 billion. Yeah.
Yes, it's not even close.
Yeah.
And they have created this completely fake reality where Ukraine is seen as, somehow taking advantage of the United States and for the United States, and which is absurd because a lot of the money that we have spent on Ukraine has come right back to our economy in the form of building munitions and weapon systems that we've given to Ukraine. And anybody who studies it would know that, but people on Fox don't know that. They just hear this garbage all day long. And it's there've been like, I've seen a little bit from like Brian Kilmeade, who's very hawkish towards Russia and Ukraine. He wants Ukraine to basically defeat Russia. Hannity was also more hawkish than other people on the network. But even now, they're falling in line. You see a little bit of, because I know last week or the week before, it was a radio show, and I don't cover the radio shows, but Trump had called in on Brian Kilmeade's radio show. And Brian Kilmeade was openly kind of squabbling with him about Ukraine, saying, well, they didn't start the war, and you can't even say that. You can't even say that. It's like Trump creates his own reality and promotes it, and Fox spews it out. So that's what's going on right now. And I don't think they have any idea how dangerous things could get very quickly, because they just believe this nonsense that they're fed all day long.
Do the hosts know the truth? Or are they so indoctrinated? Because you mentioned a couple of them have been swaying, now they've fallen in line. But, when I watch Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity, to me, it's as if they're just lying through their teeth about everything, because they're not stupid people.
Yeah.
But they obviously have a business, and they're very well remunerated. And so consequently, they have to do what they do. But is it that they're just simply soulless and that they really do hate America that much that they're prepared to lie for money?
I think Hannity, there's been times, January 6th, after the January 6th pardons, Hannity really didn't talk about them. He talked about Biden's pardons. He complained about Biden's pardons. I actually went back through my transcripts, triple checked that, because I was like, why don't I have any clips of Hannity talking about these pardons? Because I think even for Hannity, that was too far for Trump to pardon all of those monstrous
1,600 people. Yeah.
Yes, who had beaten cops and were part of hate groups. I think for Hannity, that had gone too far because he didn't talk about it. So there are moments, but I do think like Greg Gutfeld will say anything. He will say anything if he thinks he can keep his job. Jesse Waters is just, brain fog all the time. There's nothing going on up there. He will repeat anything. He believes any conspiracy theory. Laura Ingraham, I think, will toe the party line. So she's the smartest one. And she just seems craven to me. When I watch her, I just don't think she cares what she says, as long as she can keep her job and get other parts of her agenda covered, which she would love a theocracy. She would love it if we had, hardly any taxes. She would love it if, we could go back to just ignoring racism. Those are themes I see on her show a lot. And she hates China. She's obsessed with China. And Hannity is just so tight and close with Trump that I think he's completely sold out. And it's reported that he makes $35 million a year. So that's a lot of money to just, toe the line and do whatever you're told and suck it up. And the way he's dealt with it, like I said, is he just talks about things he wants to talk about and avoids topics he doesn't want to. So, for instance, he hasn't talked a lot about Russia or Ukraine. He just talks this past few weeks. It's all been Doge. It's all Doge. It's just this wonderful man, Elon Musk, who's a genius. And the dual interview with Trump and Elon Musk was very entertaining to watch because Hannity had questions that were 2 minutes long. Just.
Well, that's right. You timed how
I
much
time him.
in your
I did.
podcast. You timed how much time each of the three got. And you said Hannity had, what was it, like 33% of the time or something?
Yeah, Hannity, I broke it down by minutes, and Trump, because Trump can talk about anything.
Yeah.
You can literally talk water pressure and he can go for 40 minutes. So that was easy that Trump dominated. Trump, I think, was like 29 minutes or something, and Hannity was 15 minutes and 50 seconds. So it was actually 15 minutes and 30 seconds, actually. And Elon Musk was around 15 minutes. So it wasn't that much, but it's embarrassing when the person interviewing somebody is talking more than the person who they're supposed to be interviewing. And that was true because Hannity what prompted me to do that is some MAGA person was complaining on Twitter. I can't believe Hannity spent a minute on a question. And I said, oh, you don't know Sean Hannity. This is what he does. Because his questions are like, Donald J. Trump, you are amazing and you are brilliant. And we owe so much to you as a country. And you are going to be the best president ever. And that's before he begins to even get close to the question. So he just sets it up and then helps maneuver Trump and how to answer it. And it's just, he's the king of the leading question. It's out of control.
But he did that leading up to the election a lot, didn't he, with Trump?
Yes.
Because Trump didn't know what was going on, really. He was confused and he was stressed because of the legal cases. And so Hannity was having to ask him leading questions and steer him. And even, I think it was on the subject of, being a dictator for a day or on day one. Didn't Hannity kind of go, well, actually, do you really mean that? Or what you actually mean is that, you're just gonna, and it kind of, and in fact, Trump didn't take the bait from what I remember.
Yeah, it was very awkward. I remember that because I think it was in one of the town halls. Hannity did a series. I figured out last year I watched 88 hours of Trump, and that's based on rallies, town halls, interviews, press conferences. It's a lot. And Hannity was a lot of that. He also did interviews with Laura Ingraham, but and a real goofy one he did with Vance and Jesse Waters. But and then he would go on Fox and Friends, of course, all the time, or he'd call in.
That's where he'd call in, and they could never get rid of him. Yeah,
yeah, and they did have him on the comfy couch once. I call it the comfy couch. It's this circular couch, but they had him on the comfy couch once, where he was sitting in the middle, and it looked very bizarre. But Hannity definitely kind of basically holds Trump's hand, looks at him right in the eye and just says, this is what you're going to say. And you can see creative editing. I've seen editing in all of their interviews, which was hilarious that they went after 60 minutes. And the only reason why Fox does not face the same scrutiny is because Fox is cable. And in the United States, cable can do whatever it wants.
Right.
But network television has to adhere to a certain standard and can't give candidates free time. And a lot of Americans don't know this. And I'm constantly explaining it to people because they'd say, why doesn't Fox just lose its license? Because it's obviously just campaigning for people. And it's because Fox is cable. And
it's not over the air. And so it's the moment that you are transmitting on a kind of wireless frequency that you are then subject to the requirements of the regulator.
Yes.
Let's talk a bit more about the propaganda because, we've mentioned state television, and it's not just Fox, of course. Fox kind of leads the charge, but there's Newsmax and there's OAN and there's, various, I think there's like 7 or 8 now of these far right kind of Trump channels that are pumping out similar material all the time. And the way I see it is that if people want to kind of fact check or cross check cross-reference. They switch over to Newsmax and they're saying the same thing. And they're like, well, it must be true because they're saying it on Newsmax as well.
Yeah.
Which is barely due diligence. But the effect of this over decades, if you include Rush Limbaugh and that whole kind of talk radio movement, is that people have been indoctrinated and brainwashed effectively into thinking that America is something that it isn't, but also that Democrats are something that they are not either.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And this contributed to Trump winning the election, of course.
100%. I mean, I have a category. When I watch Fox, I have a spreadsheet and I keep track of every single minute and I label every single minute. And a new category that I came up with last year was just called Democrats Are Terrible. Yeah. And that's when they go they'll start on a segment, usually start with one Democrat or the whole party. And they'll spend, 7-8 minutes just, oh, look at how horrible they are. They're terrible. They're communists. They're Marxists. They want to overtake the government, redo our economic system. They throw around terms like communism and Marxism like crazy when they clearly don't know what they mean. And we're incredibly capitalist, a very free market based economy, but it doesn't matter to them. They live in their alternate reality where, they act as if, and I've heard them say stuff this absurd, that if Kamala Harris had won, we would have become communist, like overnight. Like somehow the means of production would have been seized by the state and your local Starbucks would be owned by the U.S. federal government. That's what communism actually is. But I don't think their viewers know that. And it's just a big, scary word. And they have equated, ironically, communism with totalitarianism or authoritarian government, which makes sense. But that's exactly what Trump is becoming, this authoritarian government.
And the irony is he's siding with Putin, who, of course, operates that system in his own country.
Yes.
Under the Russian Federation. So this is the frustration, I guess, for those of us who get it, is the contradiction in so much of what they say, and how their viewers who are voters are voting against their own best interests, and are yet kind of thinking that they're saving America somehow, even if the cost of food and living goes up, that they've now been told that they are doing their bit for the country by continuing to support this regime.
Yes, and he also, one thing that he promotes, and they go right along with it, and it's totally false, is the idea that our oil and gas industry is nationalized, and that when we drill, that money goes straight into our treasury, which is not the case at all. It's drilled by private companies. They make the profit. We get a small royalty only on oil extracted from public land. Some of that's offshore. 80% of the oil and gas extracted in the United States comes from private lands. So we get a tiny fraction of the total revenue for oil and gas. But he will say things like, well, we just need to drill, baby, drill, and we'll be rich beyond our means and we'll pay off our debt. And that's absurd. And he also says things about tariffs, and they don't include any of the context with tariffs, whereas currently tariffs make up 2% of our total revenue. Income tax is about 47%. That varies from year to year. And in order for us to raise tariffs to the level that we would get rid of income tax, we'd basically destroy our economy and cripple the international economy because of how much trade that would be, how much you'd put tariffs on everything. Prices of everything would go up. And your average lower income person in the United States doesn't even pay income tax. So, what are we doing? It's just a big lie. So that's one thing that they promote, and they don't even stop for a second and go, wait a second, that's not how oil and gas works in the United States. BP or ExxonMobil or Shell, they make the money. We don't make the money.
There's a reason that Exxon is the second biggest company in the world, for example. I mean, it's all profit driven. But when Trump does this drill, baby, drill, I mean, part of that is coming from his hatred of climate change and the climate crisis. He's just trying to kind of own the libs on that subject. And I think that goes back to there being that wind turbine in Scotland that he never liked on the, destroying the view from his golf course. Yeah. That he tried to sue and he lost. And so there's that, which he calls windmills, of course, much to the annoyance of the Dutch. But I get a feeling that these component parts are ultimately going to hit a wall at some point where things quality of life is going to get so bad in the United States that there must come a point, at least I hope so, where Fox viewers and Trump voters, who are one of the same, will start to unravel because they recognize that life was better under Joe Biden and the Democrats, and the eggs were cheaper.
Yeah, I think that's totally what's going to happen. It's hard to know when the tipping point will occur.
Yeah,
but he's doing absolutely nothing to get grocery prices down or prices down in general. And one of the things about oil and gas that they also don't ever mention, I sometimes see somebody kind of hint at it, but there's no incentive for Exxon or BP or Shell or any other oil company to want lower prices. There's no incentive. It's traded on the global market. OPEC controls twice as much oil and gas that we do. And OPEC is, of course, a consortium, kind of a cartel of sorts of oil producing countries. So they want to keep the price as high as they possibly can. And now, these for-profit companies in the United States want to keep their prices as high as they can. So they're not going to just drill to get the price down just because the president says so. They might get more leases. They might get control of more land, but they're going to drill when it's, beneficial for them. That's it. That's just how it works. And because we don't own that oil and we don't own that gas, it's just not how we did not nationalize it in the United States. So something that fundamental that people just don't understand, he promotes. So he's not doing anything to get grocery prices down, oil or gas prices down. He's just not doing anything that would get prices down. And his tax cuts are reckless that he wants to keep on and expand. And that would probably most likely raise the deficit. These Doge cuts are going to cause all kinds of problems. Somebody finally mentioned on PBS NewsHour, they said, well, this is going to show up in the jobs report. When you keep cutting all these jobs, eventually you're going to see it in the economy. So this idea that maybe 6 months from now, maybe a year, when your typical Fox News viewer, your typical MAGA enthusiast, maybe somebody who maybe begrudgingly voted for Trump. I think he's going to lose them first. The people in the middle who go, you know what? Eggs are still crazy expensive. I want to go shopping at the grocery store. I run out of money very quickly. My gasoline hasn't moved at all. And they're going to get fed up because they don't care about his lofty, crazy tariff ideas and his Gulf of America or the threats he's done with Canada or Panama or Greenland. Your average American doesn't care. They just want to live their life, be left alone, and live a decent life. And he's not giving that to them. They're going to turn on him. So it'll be interesting too. I kind of think that it's already starting to happen sooner than I thought. I thought I would have to wait longer to see this, but I saw, like, right after the election, I got a peak in my subscribers. I got a little spike, and I know other people in my line of work, people who are critical of Trump did. And then it flatlined in December, which is normal because people care about the holidays. I get that. And then it started to slowly creep back up, and I've had 2 of my best months ever because people are revved up and they want to stop this and they feel powerless. And so they're turning to Midas Touch. They're turning to Aaron Rupar. They're turning to me. They're turning to you. They're turning to people who are offering a different perspective on this, who are critical of this propaganda machine, and they're looking for answers. And so and these town halls where people are showing up and crowding them and screaming at Congress people,
being arrested by unmarked police or security people with no identification.
Yeah, it is horrible stuff. Oh yeah, that's true. That did happen. That's terrifying.
Yeah.
And we'll see what happens. I think that because every day it's sort of this, for me, I have to kind of fight dread because I'll just, open up my phone and just go, oh, what is he doing today?
Yeah.
What happened today?
But I think we all do that, and including our viewers and listeners too, because it is very depressing.
Yeah.
Because we're watching the US be deconstructed before our very eyes. And for those of us who love America, especially for those of us immigrants who came here, that's quite the shift, isn't it? You come here because it is this amazing experiment, and now it's being deconstructed. It's extra frustrating. Could we talk about the other president? You mentioned Doge a couple of times, but maybe we should talk about the guy that people didn't vote for but seem to have ended up with anyway.
Yeah.
Elon Musk is basically running the government. It seems that way. And during the cabinet meeting, he held court a lot more than Trump did. During the Oval Office kind of press event, he held court standing up, Trump sitting down. A small child was the only thing to come between them.
Insane.
And it was all very weird. But Musk himself is as nuts as Trump. I mean, this is something that people don't really realize. They assume that because he's rich, he must be smart. But he is so unwell. They're both so compromised that it really is the blind leading the blind, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't do like a psychoanalysis of Elon Musk, but there's some deep-seated problems there with his personality.
Yeah.
The bizarre, constantly having children with different women. He's 4 women now.
That's a eugenics thing, though, that I think that the kind of far-right movement are obsessed with. Yeah.
So creepy. And that, he parades around this one little boy, even though he has all these other children, but we never see them. And then, the joke of him putting the kid on his shoulders, sort of like a human shield.
Yeah.
Everybody said that. And his just insane ego, which is also as bloated and as delusional as Trump. This idea that he has both of them almost seem to act like they have magical powers almost. And they both view themselves as smarter than anyone else in the room. And no, Elon Musk does not come across as very bright to me. He just comes across as somebody who's ruthless, who is an opportunist, who knew how to, that's the sad thing is most, not all, but most billionaires, it's like they didn't become billionaires because they were bright necessarily. Some of them, sure. But some of them, they were just cutthroat and ruthless.
Yeah, they shafted people. And we should remind people that he bought Tesla. He didn't, create Tesla. And this is the thing. It's like he has done these kind of hostile takeovers. And that's how he's been able, with the kind of ruthlessness, to kind of ramp things up. But what you're describing in his personality is narcissism. The same as Trump. They are both narcissists. We know that Trump is a malignant narcissist because the psychiatrists have told us so, but I haven't yet seen a psychiatrist analyze Elon Musk in any great detail, but I'm sure that they both sing off the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, and it's an odd, I don't know how their relationship has lasted this long, because normally narcissists won't put up with that for too long. They'll stab each other in the throat. I joked watching their interview, and Hannity said, "Oh, you guys are getting along so great. You're like brothers. Look at you two." And then they repeated that on Fox and Friends. "Oh, they get along so great. They're answering each other's sentences." I'm like, no, it was Elon Musk trying to cut Trump off repeatedly. And I said, if you stuck a wood chipper in the room and then took the camera crew out and somebody just slipped in the wood chipper, who would push who in the wood chipper? Yeah. It just felt like I called them dime store Bond villains. That's what they looked like.
They clearly hate each other.
But it's very true.
They need each other, right? Because Trump needs Elon because Elon spent $270 million getting him elected. And Trump puts wealthy people onto a pedestal because they can fund his criminality, I guess. And Elon needs Trump because Elon wants to take over the world, and being the king of America is the best place to start, and knows that Trump is dumb enough that Elon can be like, well, I've got an idea for, didn't he say he could fix air traffic control? And Trump was like, yeah, go on, you might as well try. You can do backwards rockets. Surely you can do air traffic control. I mean, they talk about these complex systems that have evolved over decades, like there's something to be turned off and swapped out with a laptop. Yeah, he has no idea what he's doing. And that's the other thing is I think Trump is sort of exploiting this good cop, bad cop situation with him, where he just makes Musk, allows, I should say, doesn't make Musk do anything, but he basically allows Musk to run, rampant. And then Trump could say, well, he's a genius, just let him do his thing. He'll figure it out.
And then Trump doesn't have to be the bad guy firing people.
Right.
So there's that kind of creepy situation that's going on with the two where they're both exploiting each other in different ways. But I just, their egos are just so enormous. And I don't know how Trump will handle this. Like, people were like, how are they going to even make it to inauguration? Which people were saying that. And when I watched them in that interview, I just thought, and that other interview where they did in the Oval Office with Trump standing next to the desk with his son, and how small Trump looked, just defeated.
Yes.
And here's this idiot who nobody voted for, who couldn't run for president because he wasn't born here, who is wearing this ridiculous outfit with a baseball cap and just, well, blah, 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 literally. And Trump's just cowering as this small child's like taunting him. And I thought, now, how long can this go on? Because Trump, even though he might feel like he owes this man something, I just can't imagine Trump putting up with this for that much longer. Because
Trump shits on everybody at the end of the day, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So there's going to be some fallout. And the smartest person in the room that day was the 4-year-old boy.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Noticed.
Yes.
But my prediction, because I have talked about this before, is that Trump will do that thing that he's done with Ron DeSantis, where he just doesn't talk to him anymore. So he kind of allows him to, he'll allow Musk just to do Doge and do his thing, but he'll have absolutely no contact with him. And I've noticed that Musk is the one that's residing in the White House. Trump is spending most of his time in Florida.
Yeah. Which is also disturbing because, we all know that Trump basically ran for president to stay out of prison.
Right.
Not because he really wants to be president.
Yeah.
And Melania, where's she? Have we seen her at all?
She probably has a whole other family.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Other than her fabulous fashion choice at the, oh my goodness, that inauguration hat. Other than that goofy outfit at the inauguration and scowling the whole time. She's completely been a non-entity. So, she stands next to him sometimes at events, but she's not really doing anything. And I don't think she's there much either. So
she's done with it. She's just for hire now. So it's like, if you want me to show up at that thing, it's like 10 million. And and that's kind of it. And I'll show up dressed like Gru from Despicable Me, and you'll just have to deal with it.
Yeah.
So how are the Fox viewers and the Trump voters digesting Elon Musk? What is the thought about him? Because, Tesla stock is tanking at the moment, which is clearly a protest. There has been protests at Tesla showrooms, incidentally. But do people think of him as being this amazing guy? Are they buying the propaganda that Fox is peddling?
Yeah, some of them are. I get comments on social media from them that they believe all of the nonsense, that he is a genius, that he's the one who's actually designing the rockets. He's the one that designed the car. He's he's some sort of mastermind. And he got all this money because he's just so brilliant, and that we shouldn't question. We should just allow him to do what he needs to do, and that he's no different than any other cabinet member. But I'm like, but other cabinet members have to be approved by the Senate. Most of them do. And, he wasn't approved by anybody. He just, gets in there and starts taking over the whole government. And it's interesting because my brother is an auditor. That's what he does for a living. And he works for a state government. And he's a CPA. It's not an easy job. It's not something you just walk in and, I'm going to audit these books. You have to, just to become a CPA is a lot of work. And it took my brother years to get to that point. And so that's the other thing, is they act like it's just really easy to find this waste, and that he opened the books and that, I'll just cut this and cut this and cut this, and I'm saving all this money. When, New York Times did a thorough investigation of what they've found so far that's publicly posted about Doge, and they found mistakes all over it. Yeah. Things that were double, triple counted. He's counting credit instead of the full amount. So that's definitely going on, but I don't think the actual, your average Fox viewer has figured this out yet. I think some of them aren't happy about the fact that their man isn't the main project. They would rather, I have seen some resentment that Trump is not the main focus, because they didn't really, Musk got at it at the end. he was just this weird man who would jump and make that goofy thing that he kept doing on stage and threw a lot of money around. But he was not the man that they fell in love with. The man that they fell in love with is this crazy person named Donald J. Trump, who would talk like a preacher in his speeches, like his rallies. I talked about this before. When he addressed his rallies, he would say things just crazy. Especially if you've watched several of them, where he'd go, "I will make all your pain go away. I will take all of your problems and make them go away." And just, that's like a preacher. That's not real. That's not realistic. Nobody can do that. And
but they think of him as godly, don't they?
They do.
They think that he is the chosen one. And
yes.
And certainly amongst evangelical communities, they've elevated the least religious person on the planet to be the second coming. And then I think when he got shot, he really played on that and said it was God's will that he was still alive. And they bought into that in such a way. In fact, the opening of the RNC conference, where he kind of walked on at that speech to Darth Vader music, and he just stood in like a silhouette for a while.
Yeah.
And people just couldn't believe it. It's like they were literally witnessing the rise of Jesus.
Yeah, on the inauguration day, which I captured the entire thing and went through it was like 5.5 hours. And then I also compared it to PBS's coverage. They interviewed, it wasn't much of the footage, but they had sections where, they had to close it down because the weather was too cold.
Right.
So instead they had stuff going on in an arena, Capital One Arena, and they had people lining up for hours in the cold. So I was like, why did we cancel this again? Because now you just have people lining up outside.
They clearly canceled it because they knew that they wouldn't get the same crowd as Obama had and Joe Biden had, and Joe Biden's was inside. But they didn't want the comparison made again because they knew that it was a problem for Sean Spicer on day one.
And when they interviewed some of these people who were trying to get into Capital One Arena, that's where I saw it. One woman just started crying. Like, she just said, well, tomorrow is going to be a better day because we have Trump as president. And they said, well, what do you think? This is a Fox person, so a very friendly person interviewing her. It was Griff Jenkins. And he's like, what do you think's going to happen? And she just goes, and she literally said it. And I went, oh my God. I was just like shaking on my end. She just goes, all my problems are going to go away.
Yeah.
He's going to make all my pain go away. And I'm like, she's repeating the nonsense that he said on stage. That's how they view him. So some of them do resent Musk a little bit because they're like, who is this guy? Why am I not seeing my guy? Why isn't Trump talking? I don't want to see this guy. And so I have seen some hints of that. And I think that will probably get worse as the longer this stretches on.
Because everything's going to get worse, isn't it?
Yes.
I mean, the authoritarianism is only going to get worse.
Yes.
Once Trump gets wind of the fact that the media, are saying it's a terrible thing, he'll then just ramp it up. And Musk, obviously, he's on prescription ketamine. I mean, that's not going to end well either. So something is going to give. My fear is that it's going to end in violence or something. I mean, this is a recipe for the destruction of an entire nation and potentially the world. I mean, our European allies now have basically been told that they are no longer protected by America, who has decided to side with Russia. I mean, this is unprecedented. And yet people are carrying on going, oh, well, eggs, they're $7. And I'm thinking, well, you don't need to eat eggs. You could literally just cut eggs out of your diet and you'd still be alive.
Yeah.
But what we're really dealing with is the fall of American democracy. And yet people are still concerned that they can't get an omelet.
It's denial. It feels like a person who eloped to a person they didn't know very well, and they're in the first few weeks of the marriage, and they're still like, it's going to be fine. It's fine.
And then they saw a big knife in his bag, and they're like, what have I done?
Denial is very powerful. And I think that there's a large portion of the electorate that is in denial. And I also think that Elon Musk is just not likable. Trump is better at, even though, most people with a brain in their head think he's a dangerous sociopath, But to the people he knows how to manipulate, they see him as this benevolent, charismatic, amazing person, and they like him. They genuinely love his personality. Elon Musk is not likable. He's creepy. He's got a weird accent. He is, and Americans are very weird about that. Trust me.
And he can't speak in complete sentences either.
No, he can't.
Like getting blood out of a stone trying to listen to this guy talk.
His speech patterns are strange. He odd mannerisms, and he's got this bizarre personal life with these children scattered all over the place. And he dresses strange. Like there's nothing. He doesn't come across like, if you look at from a MAGA perspective, they want like all American, all of that. And you see this odd foreigner. That's how they would view him, in strange clothes, who speaks strangely, who is just not, he doesn't come across as warm and fuzzy at all. Doesn't come across as kind, doesn't come across as likable. And he has his fan base, but they don't, the typical person who is obsessed with Elon Musk is like obsessed with crypto and like playing video games all day long. And I don't mean to disparage video games, because like my niece loves video games.
But it's definitely two different aisles of governance going on. Because the way I've described it before is that Trump plays in the arena of things that give him pleasure, like plastic straws. We're doing away with plastic straws. Like that's very much a Trump thing. Or paper straws, bringing back plastic straws. Gulf of Mexico being renamed as Gulf of America, going after Panama and Greenland. Like these are the things that to him are good for the brand. But then the other side, which is the Doge side and the Musk side, is actually far more sinister, because USAID, which is kind of where they started with this, I mean, and that only represents 0.63% of the federal budget, but it provides a life force for, so many countries. And by removing this international development, it's not just aid, it's also development, you are effectively killing millions of people. People will fall foul of HIV and AIDS and Ebola and drought and famine. And on Thursday, the Supreme Court sided with Trump and basically said, you don't have to come up with the money because he missed the deadline for, the legal case. And that now also puts us into a further constitutional crisis. I mean, this is life or death for other people. And yet Trump and Musk, they relish the death of millions of people. It's like a genocide.
Yeah, and it is terrible, because a lot of Sudan is a great example of one place that we were helping that desperately needs the help. There's millions of people who face starvation there right now because of an ongoing civil war that's been, no end in sight, was the conflict in Sudan. And it doesn't get as much press because we're not involved in it directly, except for we do provide aid, and cutting that aid off is going to be devastating, especially for HIV patients all over the world who can't get treatment. And if they can't get treatment, they're going to spread the disease, because the treatment prevents, if you're on antiviral medications, the virus in your body becomes so low that you can't spread it. And so that's why it was so important to keep these people on those medications, which for us is relatively cheap in the grand scheme of things, but for them, it's going to be much harder to come up with. We're also opening the door for China to fill that void all over the world. And they're going to exploit that. And Russia might as well, because Russia has pulled all kinds of shenanigans in Africa to manipulate people against Ukraine. Because when they couldn't get food from Ukraine, Russia swept in, gave people food, and then started trashing Ukraine. Oh, Ukraine's evil. This is the reason why you can't get your grain or your food's gotten more expensive. It's because of those evil people in Ukraine. And Russia's been doing that for years. They've been manipulating Africa and China as well. China would love to get a foothold everywhere in the world. So by cutting off aid, which a lot of it was just food, basic necessities for life, that was a form of diplomacy for the United States. And they had a guy on, I don't remember his name, but he appeared on PBS and on Fox. And he was this fiery older man who had been the director of USAID under George W. Bush. And he just went off. He's like, I'm a conservative Republican. Trump doesn't understand USAID at all. USAID helps people. It's good. He goes, if he doesn't like these programs, just get new programs. You don't have to wipe the whole thing out. He goes, this is diplomacy. This is good for our country. And it's good for American businesses because American businesses work quite a bit with USAID. And
well, we're sending stuff. I mean, anything that we send is coming from here.
Yes. And ironically, USAID has been criticized for being too capitalist, too, free market. For years it has been. And the guy was saying this, and he said, this idea that it's Marxist is complete trash. This idea that it's socialist is complete trash. And basically what they did is they found programs that had existed under Biden, which you could have ended like that the next day and just stuck a new program in there with the same budget if you wanted. And they acted like instead of like bringing literally food to starving people, it's, transgender operas in Guatemala or something. And it's not what it really is. And he said, this guy was so great. He goes, when you have a Republican in office, guess what? USAID gets run by Republicans, and the people who are the, day-to-day workers will do whatever they're told. That's how civil service actually works. There's no deep state. That's not how it works. No. Because you get a good administrator in there and you can do whatever you want, and they'll work in tandem with the president. He just doesn't understand the program.
But because they created the deep state conspiracy, they're having to now see that through. But what they're doing is they're firing Republicans from lifelong jobs. So many people that were, let's say, arguably half of the people that work for the federal government are Republicans.
Yeah, easily.
And so those people, and they're discovering that these jobs are not just in D.C., and they didn't realize this in advance, that actually all over the country are these centers where the federal government work and outposts. And consequently, there are people now complaining to their Congress people saying, I've lost my job, I voted for Trump, this is not what I was expecting. And I suppose that is an implosion point for this administration.
Yeah, there's farmers who worked with USAID who would basically, any surplus they had would basically be sold to USAID and help starving people. And then there's another program that, Musk cut abruptly, where farmers had gotten equipment for green energy to sort of, reduce their need of fossil fuels. And they were like halfway through the program. So they had bought all this equipment and they were being reimbursed by the feds. And now the feds cut it off. Yeah. And these farmers are like, I have $50,000 I owe on this stuff and no one's going to help me out. And I don't know what I'm going to do.
Meanwhile, Trump loves the farmers, as we've been told.
He claims he loves the farmers. And then CDC has a huge office in Atlanta and all these people are losing their jobs. And in suburban Atlanta, and you wouldn't think in a purple state that's, barely went for Trump in the last election, went for Biden in the election before, that these cuts would affect it so negatively, but it did. Yeah. And then you have, just like any other type of community, if it's maybe your job, you still have your job, but your friend lost their job, your neighbor lost their job, that's going to start turning people because they're going to,
and people are going to talk. Exactly. And at the end of the day, it always is the economy that people's vote goes for first in this country. Just always is.
Yeah.
And part of that is because wages never went up in line with inflation and people need to be able to support their families. So it's only natural, but that's ultimately that kind of hot button issue. We have to take a quick break, but I want to come back and talk about immigration. Laura Ingraham went to Guantanamo Bay, and I'm sure you've got plenty to say about that. We'll do that next here on The Weekend Show. A secret weapon is a great asset to have in your back pocket. It helps you get ahead in life. That's how Mac Weldon thinks about clothing, as a secret weapon, timeless, classic style that's infused with performance fabrics and hidden details. Whether you're looking for light-as-air underwear, anti-odor tees, or sweaters with lightweight warmth, Mac Weldon has a range of clothes that feel comfortable all day long and never go out of style. Since I received my zip-up hoodie, I have not taken it off. Seriously, it's one of those items of clothing that just stays on my back pretty much every day. Some guys just want to look good without calling attention to themselves. Mack Weldon Apparel gives you understated good looks for understated confidence. They're not flashy, just classic, always in style, and made from the world's most comfortable performance fabrics. Get timeless looks with modern comfort from Mack Weldon. Go to mackweldon.com and get 25% off your first order of $125 or more with promo code WEEKEND. That's MackWeldon.com. Promo code WEEKEND. So, it's a new year, 2025, and you're thinking, how am I going to make this year different? Am I going to build something for myself? I'm dying to be my own boss, or see if I can turn this business idea I've been kicking around into a reality. But I just don't know how to make it happen. Shopify is how you're going to make it happen, and let me tell you how. The best time to start your new business is right now, and Shopify makes it simple to create your brand, open for business, and get your first sale. Get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates, no coding or design skills required. All you need to do is drag and drop. Their powerful social media tools let you connect all of your channels and create shoppable posts to help you sell everywhere that people scroll. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. They help with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard, allowing you to focus on the important stuff like growing your business. With Shopify, your first sale is closer than you think. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/weekend, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/weekend to start selling with Shopify today. That's shopify.com/weekend. We're back on The Weekend Show with Juliet Jeske from Decoding Fox News. I'm Anthony Davis. I watched on Fox Laura Ingraham doing this outside broadcast. She went to Guantanamo Bay with Pete Hegseth, former Fox News host who is now the Secretary of Defense. And they were getting very excited watching these illegals, as they refer to them so offensively, in chains being walked off of a military transport aircraft. I mean, this was a vast aircraft, cost millions, I'm sure, and there was only 8 or 9 of these prisoners on it. And now we're seeing that some of these people that have been held at Guantanamo are now suing the government over their treatment. And we're also discovering, I think the Miami Herald did a story, that some of the things that people were being picked up for and, effectively taken to Guantanamo was like biking on the wrong side of the road, crossing the Rio Grande on foot, shoplifting at Target. And these are the arrest records for some of the 178 Venezuelan migrants who were detained in Guantanamo, much to the celebration of Laura Ingraham. I mean, this is the Nazification of the immigration story here in America.
Yeah.
How have you been reading it?
It's the cruelty is the point, is definitely everything. It's absurd. Jessica Tarloff put it perfectly when they kept saying 30,000, we're going to send 30,000 people to Guantanamo. And she just blatantly just said, well, we've never had more than 700 people there. So I don't know how we're going to get to 700 to 30,000, but okay. And what's also ironic is that every other president has tried to get that shut down pretty much after 9/11. They realized this is really expensive and we don't really, it's caused all kinds of legal problems with having people there. It was a
facility for torture, and that in itself doesn't sit pretty with human rights.
Yeah, a lot of bad things have gone down there, and it's just legally it's a huge mess, which is why the cases against the men that they did have in prison there that were related to 9/11 have taken so long. It's part of the reason is because legally it's in a very kind of gray area. It was just a terrible idea. They didn't want to have them on American soils, which is why they used this goofy Guantanamo Bay situation where they were like, well, we'll use this land and it's technically not American soil, but yada, yada. And it's just, it's a bad idea. And they're gleeful about punishing undocumented immigrants because it's this, it's cruelty is the point. They get off on, it's their fuel, it's their drive, and I think it's what like the diehard MAGA people want to see. And when they get polled, the diehard MAGA people, that's what gets them the most worked up. They view immigrants, the other, as evil, as bad, as toxic, as poison, as destroying this country. And they act as if all we have to do to get rid of crime is eliminate migrants, and we won't have any crime. And all we have to do to get rid of all the bad things in our economy is just get rid of these migrants, and then everything will be rosy and everything will be great. And Laura Ingraham in general has a very sadistic quality to her. Yeah. She, just the way she speaks, there's a cruelty to her tone and the way she talks down to people and talks of people, very dehumanizing. And she's been doing that for years, but there's this almost gleeful. It's like a, I hate to call it, I've called her a Disney villainess before, only without the glamour, because that's what she reminds me of. Somebody who just, like, as they're standing over their cauldron and they're looking down into the cauldron and they're seeing people suffering, they're laughing. And that's her energy. And that's been her energy for years. And I think that that's the point. They want to see them in chains. They want to see them at Guantanamo. They want to see them suffering, which is really strange. I mean, obviously, there have been some cases of undocumented immigrants committing crime, and they've exploited that and blown them up and like, look at these horrible people. But the vast majority of these people aren't committing crimes. They're just poor people looking for work, or they're fleeing a terrible situation in their home country. And, you know, they'll find these exceptions and say, well, they're all criminals. And they use stats that are completely false. Yeah. Trump, something he kept saying during the campaign that was driving me batty is he kept changing the number of undocumented immigrants who'd entered the country under Biden. And he got as high as 21 million, which is a completely made up fiction. I mean, it's total fiction. Nobody else has said that except for him. And even on Fox, they don't say that. And sometimes he would change the number 3 times in one speech. He'd start at like 19 million, he'd go to 20, then he'd say 21 million.
But they almost know now that the truth is irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I think Trump worked that out in the election campaign, is that because there is no journalistic pushback in this country, and there is a complete void when it comes to being held to account, even by the opposition party, which doesn't really operate as an opposition, as I know politics from the UK, is that you can say anything and anything goes. And once you know that lying is legal and making up stats and numbers just plays well, then why would you stop?
Yeah. I remember back in the day, it wasn't as bad. Trump has changed everything. Growing up during Reagan, there's definitely things that got exaggerated, sure. and there's grandiose speech and whatever. And he weirdly weaseled out of Iran-Contra, which still baffles my mind. I was a kid during that time, and I was just kind of like, I don't really understand what the scandal is. Then as an adult, I was like, I can't believe he got away with this. He just weaseled his way out of it.
Well, he was a good actor. I mean, I suppose that's kind of how it played out with him.
Yeah, but it wasn't as bad until Trump, until we get this lunatic who's, a sociopath. I know George Conway calls him a sociopath all the time, and I would agree with him on that.
Yeah.
With severe personality problems, narcissistic personality disorder, I would definitely say he has malignant narcissism, and he just makes up his own reality. And he does it so bombastically and so aggressively that people just give up, and they just, okay, that's what we're doing now. And even when people try to push back, the lie machine just gets on overdrive, and it becomes this echo chamber of just this toxic, the kind of false narrative. And that's what gets promoted. And he just declares something, and there it is. It does kind of remind me of, kind of the emperor's, new clothes, or whatever, what that tale is called, the emperor's new clothes, where somebody's walking around naked, and because he's the emperor, nobody will say anything, right. Like, hey, you're naked.
That played out in the horrific cabinet meeting on Wednesday, which was, again, a press thing, and there was select press were invited. And someone did say to Elon Musk, how do you handle the fact that some of the cabinet are not in agreement with what you're doing? And Trump took that question, which wasn't for him, and as an authoritarian, he turned it into a joke sequence. Oh, well, no one thinks that, do they? There's no one here that thinks that, do you? Putting this kind of blackmail upon people, which is the authoritarians' playbook, page 1. But, the coverage didn't mention the fact that he was trying to rewrite the narrative. And we know that he's already barred a whole bunch of journalists. I mean, from that event, Reuters were banned, the Associated Press were banned, and I think a German newspaper was banned. And this is how it's going to play out now. Whenever a question gets asked that he doesn't like, then that news organization will no longer have any access.
Yeah, and another thing that was very odd, very similar, was when Emmanuel Macron of France corrected Trump.
Yes.
In the White House, Trump had said something about Ukraine.
And it was the money being a loan, and he said that, Europe gets its money back, whereas we have to, give the money.
Yes, that's right. And he actually touched Trump.
Yes.
He physically touched him and
that's
corrected
right.
him.
Gave him some arm treatment, didn't he? Yeah.
And the way Fox handled that, which was interesting, is they showed clips of Macron next to Trump, and they just said, look at how handsy he is with Trump. He keeps I'm going to make a video out of it. I just haven't had time yet because I have to kind of find the full clip and figure out how to cram it into 2 minutes. But they had reduced it to Emmanuel Macron was just handsy because he was a French guy. And I was like, this is appalling. And they didn't mention that he'd corrected him. They just said, see how many times he's touching him? Look at him. He's touching him again.
Yeah.
And that was on the 5, and they were sort of laughing about it. And I'm like, wow, that's some spin there of how they just changed what happened. And I was like, wow, this is next level. We are in 1984. This is happening. It's just, they just make up what they want to make up. And I just went, that's a creative twist there.
Yeah.
He's just a handsy French guy. Those French people like to touch
kissing
people.
him on both cheeks. Goodness.
Yeah. That's how they played it off.
We're also, though, in 1934. And the serious story here, because, I find myself laughing a lot when I'm making videos, and it's a nervous laughter.
Yeah.
I'm not enjoying anything, but I don't really know, my body doesn't really know how else to respond to such shocking news half the time. So it does kind of end up being a nervous and embarrassing laugh. But, with people like Pete Hegseth, with his, far-right Christian nationalist tattoos, being the Secretary of Defense, they fired all the lawyers that work at the Secretary of Defense, and that, some people are suggesting is because they are preparing to do things that would be considered illegal and bringing in people who are very much on side. And I think it was Hegseth that said that we don't want any roadblocks going forward. I mean, that has made Europe very nervous, in addition to the speech that Hegseth made at the NATO summit, where he basically said that America will not be protecting Europe anymore and was effectively siding with Russia. And then we had J.D. Vance a few days later or the next day make his speech at the Munich Security Conference and say the same thing, that, I'm sorry about all that stuff that happened in the olden days, but we're back. And what I got from that is not Nazism. And it's only now that journalists are starting to use that word, but there is a common theme that I'm seeing, which is white supremacy, this kind of pure American blood. The eugenics thing is connected as well. And the desire to, referring to humans, people of color as the other.
Yeah.
That really just ricochets straight back to the Hitler's early years before the war started in 1939. Is that where this is heading?
I don't know. I'm similar in that I have developed a gallows humor about all of it, in that I will swing from complete dread of like, I don't know how I can even watch this crap anymore, into I'm just laughing at them, maniacally laughing at them, like how blatant it is, how just they don't even try to cover it up anymore. And so I have a similar weird way of handling this darkness. I fear for a number of groups. I fear that you're going to have violence just spontaneously break out in the country against brown people, basically, because we've had incidents of that happening before, smaller kind of isolated incidents, but I could see that happening again and getting worse. Or, these Guantanamo, if they do really, expand that and start putting thousands of people.
Well, they want to build camps, right? They want to build
camps,
kind of internment camps.
What is that going to turn into?
Yeah.
You're going to start with internment camps, or will it escalate? And then Europe, I'm terrified for, because nobody should trust Putin. And even if he says, oh, I'm going to stop and you can get your minerals out of Ukraine and keep your security forces, I mean, who in their right mind thinks he's going to really stop? I mean, he's not.
He'd probably reinvade Ukraine. I mean, that's what people aren't yet saying. But as I see it, the Trump will do this deal that the Americans will think that they've won because they get mineral wealth. And then Zelensky has to step down as part of the deal. And then Putin just reinvades Ukraine. And by this time, because there's no security guarantees, Trump is out of the picture. Yeah, it scares the crap out of me. And I worry for Poland. I worry for the Baltic states. I worry for Moldova, the non-NATO states in the Balkans. All of that, the entire area, I'm terrified for, because how much bite does NATO have now if we're not in it? And even though we technically still are, but we're not, we've sort of... It's done. It's done. Effectively, it's done. Yeah, and it's terrifying to me. And what's scary is that, because Trump thinks like such a child views the world as like, I'm bigger and you're all smaller and I don't need you. Yeah. He doesn't seem to understand that, like, if war escalates in Europe, it will hurt us. I mean, even from a purely selfish point of view, everything's connected. We don't win if Europe starts killing each other again. And even the idea, and this is something I was thinking of today when I was rewatching some stuff from last week, is this idea of well, we have to get all these European countries to raise their military spending. And I thought, okay, so there was like hundreds of years where Europeans killed each other, like repeatedly, over and over and over again, over the same stupid patches of land. Belgium was formed partly to stop Germany from France constantly fighting each other. England and France constantly fought each other. Italy couldn't even get it together. They were fighting each other within Italy. Spain, same thing. And Iberian Peninsula. That's why DNA from that area will be labeled as Iberian Peninsula, because it's all these different groups killing each other. Right. That's the European history. Yeah. And I don't know why. And Germany especially, of course. Yeah, Germany, of course. I mean, without saying, I should have mentioned that first. But Germany, yes, Germany was a huge problem in the 20th century, because they weren't the only reason behind World War I. They were one of many, but World War II definitely. And this idea that we should get them to build up their arms, to me seems like a totally the wrong direction. Because again, the history of Europe, and, now because of the EU and because of a number of different things, we've had a long lasting peace there for decades, but will we forever? Because now that it's starting to crumble, and, because you could have a few of these states break off and side with Russia, which we're already seeing. And then what? Then especially countries like the countries that scare me, that I'm worried for the most, are Poland and the Baltics, because they're right there. And Russia has been terrible to that entire region for hundreds of years. I mean, if you go back far enough, Russia just loves pouncing on its neighbors, and dominating its neighbors, and being terrible to Poland, being terrible to the Baltics. Poor little Baltics. They're these tiny little countries. They just want to be left alone. But this is Putin's plan. He always said that he wants to see the USSR back again. Like that is his plan. And so obviously all of these countries form part of that. And Ukraine is really just the first step towards his grand plan. And he's managed to convince Donald Trump that he's the goodie and not the baddie. And so now we have all of these Fox viewers and Trump voters literally saying out loud, well, why is Putin such a bad guy anyway? And we had Tucker Carlson going to Russia twice and making these videos showing train stations and grocery stores and interviewing the Russian president and see, he's not such a bad guy after all. And look at these beautiful trains that they have here. I mean, why wouldn't we want to be like this? I mean,
which is ironic because the trains were built by communists. The train that he kept bragging about. That I've been to the Soviet Union, so I get very worked up about this. And I've been in that metro, and I went to the Soviet Union when I was in high school, and as a student, and the metro in Moscow is stunning. They have chandeliers. It is nothing in the United States looks even close to this. It's just a jewel. And it was built as part of communist propaganda. They were trying to show the rest of the world, our system is better. You look down on us, you call us garbage, and look at what we just created. And so for Tucker Carlson, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just get so worked up about this because I was like jumping out of my skin watching that. I was like, oh my God, that's a communist like jewel that you're celebrating. But when he was down there like bragging about the metro and how beautiful it was, I was like, it was built. Look up when it was built and look up who built it, you idiot. Like, and that was the thing about the Soviet Union is you would see something like the metro that would look like a piece of art, and then their flats would be like would look like a housing project, only not nearly as nice as our housing projects. So that was. But
that's the irony of all of it, isn't it? They claim Democrats are communists, and yet they're now siding with Putin, and so and so that the irony obviously is lost on most people, and. So where do we go from here? Because my concern is that, as I said earlier, Trump is only going to become more emboldened as an authoritarian. He knows that this stuff is working. He knows that people are scared. He wants to put fear into people, but he also wants to be respected. He wants to be on Mount Rushmore. He wants to be now talking about a bill to put it literally on a bill on cash, to have Trump's face on cash.
Oh my God.
He's talking about this gold card, this golden visa that he wants to, rebrand. It's actually an old policy that he wants to rebrand, a $5 million. Anybody can come in. Russian oligarchs. He was actually asked this in the Oval Office. Well, could a Russian oligarch buy this? And he said, well, they're not such bad people. I've met some, and some are very nice. So there's no hiding now which side America is on. Not Americans, but American leadership is on. And they're never going to turn back from this. And meanwhile, Democrats really don't have a voice. They don't have a leader. They don't have any authority in either house or even in the courts. So many of the courts now have been MAGA-fied, and the Supreme Court certainly has. So do we just sit by and watch this happen? I mean, some Democratic strategists are saying just wait for it all to implode and then step in. Do you feel the same?
I don't feel the same. I think what Democrats should be doing is going for low-hanging fruit. We're not going to be able to get him down. What I saw in those town halls, and I looked up a bunch of them, when I featured just 3 of them in my podcast. They could have done a lot more. What I was just trying to show a flavor. I kind of got the best audio from the ones that I looked up. We need that in every single district. Yeah. What Democrats need to do is they need to get out and they need to be vocal and they need to show up and they need to flood every single town hall all over this country. Democrat or Republican, I don't care. You show up and you start screaming that you want change. If you get these people in purple districts, if you get people in areas where they might lose their seat, put the fear of God into them that they will lose their seat and give them hell. I am we need to be, because we're not going to be able to get the MAGA converted away from this cult, because that's what we're dealing with. We're not going to be able to pull Trump through legal means or everything we've tried so far, but we can get those Republicans, especially the Congress people who have to run every 2 years, who are very vulnerable, and you just make their life hell. And I mean, just show up at every single thing they do. Show up at every single public event, show up at every single town hall, and don't shut up. because that was effective. And they can say on Fox, oh, these are just Democrats and they're organized. And well, who cares? Yeah, we're showing up. Because my thing is, well, that's a weak argument to say, well, these are just Democrats showing up at town halls. Well, yeah, because Democrats live all over the country, including red districts. And if the Republicans actually cared about this, they would be there and they'd be yelling back. But they weren't, because there weren't anybody there. The only people who showed up were Democrats. So that said a lot to me. I'm like, that to me is the key. That's the only way we're going to get through this, is we have to fight. I kind of see what they say by like letting it implode, but we have to fight. And I also think that it will help the morale of the other side, of the people who are becoming disillusioned, to give them some place to go to kind of let this out. And I also think one of the things Democrats need to do, huge, is as people start to break from this madness, if we get people who get disillusioned by MAGA or get disillusioned by Trump, welcome them in. Don't become judgmental and, oh, you're not this or you're not that, or you're from the South, or you're, just shut up. I mean, I'm from technically Missouri's kind of, I haven't lived there for ages.
Close enough.
Yeah, it's close enough.
But
it's
I don't think Democrats are the types, and this is a massive generalization, obviously, but it doesn't go both ways. So whereas Republicans hate Democrats, Democrats don't hate Republicans. They feel sorry for them.
Yeah,
and,
I don't hate
and
them.
invariably they want to, help bring them over to the good side of the force.
Yeah.
There was a story out on Thursday saying that Republicans on Capitol Hill are shying away from criticizing Trump's policies over fear for their physical safety and for that of their families. It was Eric Swalwell from California that said that they're terrified of crossing Trump, not only because of the negative impact on their political careers, but also from anxiety that it might provoke physical threats that could cause personal upheaval and require them to hire round-the-clock security as protection. I mean, that really now is the stuff of Russia, this kind of fear of being offed or fear of being attacked by the henchmen of the leadership. And, Trump pardoning 1,600 people, he is effectively creating his own militia. He wants people to protect him, doesn't he?
Yeah, it does feel it's a very Nazi echo too, because when the Nazis first seized power, there was the Night of the Long Knives, and they went around and they just killed people who were their opposition, including other Nazis and Nazis who weren't pure enough. They just went like door to door. In some cases, they accidentally killed one person. He had the same name as somebody else. And they had to pay reparations. It's like one of those weird wrinkles to that story. But the first group they targeted were the socialists and communists in Germany, and they put them in camps before they were death camps. They rounded them up and put them in camps and beat them up and killed them. And because they thought, well, we have to get rid of our opposition first. And this idea that people are too scared to speak out in their own, even though they're elected officials, because they're worried that a MAGA person will show up and, throw a pipe bomb into the meeting hall or whatever, is very, very similar to what happened in Nazi Germany and as the Nazis were gaining power. So that is scary, and it freaks me out all the time as somebody who's read a lot about extremism and Nazis and the whole pattern of that. It scares the heck out of me. But I think too, that's why I think, don't obey in advance. Don't lay down your sword. Don't give up. It's a very, very dark time, but I think giving up would be compounding it, would make it worse. And think about how many Germans didn't say anything, who didn't agree, but they didn't say anything. I'm slightly obsessed with the white rose, which you can't see it, but the screen behind you, this little window that I'm talking to, and on the desktop on my computer is the White Rose Memorial in Munich, which is pamphlets that the German resistance was passing out at a university, and they got caught after this, like their fifth time, and they got caught. They were young people, and they were executed by Germany. And now there's schools named after them, and they're considered heroes in Germany. But that defiance, I mean, I don't want anybody getting killed. I don't want anybody getting hurt, but that defiance in the face of this evil that we're dealing with is needed. We cannot give in. We cannot give up, because it will just, like the idea of like the Panzers, the fast moving tanks that the Nazis used, would come in and just scare the hell out of everybody. At the beginning, when they started invading other countries in Europe, they came in with these crazy tanks that were faster than anybody.
It'll be Cybertrucks this time, won't
yes,
it?
and it'll be Cybertrucks. But this idea of, if you just lay down your arms, and I'm not advocating for violence. I mean that proverbially. Your arms, your voice. If you just give up your voice, if you stop fighting back, I think we just speed it up. I cannot disagree more with people who say just let it happen, because I just think no, because if you're being physically attacked,
yes,
I mean because I also think there's a psychological element to it, and if people who don't like Trump, who don't like what's happening now, but aren't political, they're not Democrats, they'd never identify as a Democrat, if they see the Democrats lying down, they'll
take advantage.
Yeah, and they don't, you've got to inspire hope in people. You've got to have people.
But maybe leadership is the issue, and that's obviously a big subject we don't really have time for, but I'm hoping that somebody or some people will step up and lead the charge. I'd even take Kamala Harris at this point, like something or some shift, because, I've always, everything I've read about how Germany kind of gave over to the Nazi party, a lot of it started with inflation, and this is how Hitler, who was the chancellor, this is how he was able to kind of convince people. Again, the same here, starts with finances. But I always struggle to really have empathy for how a country could be turned so quickly, and people could be turned so quickly into this darkness. For everything I've read, I'm like, I just don't get it. And yet here we are, 2025 in America, the land of the free, and I can feel it now. Like, I really get a sense of what was happening back in Germany during that period before the war, because it started 15 years before the war.
Yeah.
In a way that it has direct parallels with what we're seeing here in the US.
Yeah, it's very scary. And I think in this country, it's definitely, undocumented migrants are a number one target. But I also worry for the Jewish community, because they get blamed for everything anyway. Yes. And because anti-Semitism didn't go anywhere. And some of the stuff Trump says about Gaza scares me, not also because I worry about the people in Gaza. They shouldn't be kicked out of their home like that. And you can't just move 2 million people. You can't.
Well, he doesn't understand about territory, does he? He doesn't understand that kind of fundamental. He sees it. He said, well, it's just derelict, so therefore it has no value, because he sees it as a real estate deal.
Yeah.
It's the concept that people could be attached to the land.
Yeah, they're not going to move. You're going to have to physically remove them, and that's going to be an absolute horror show. And then hopefully that won't happen. And then at the same time, I think in this country, and I said this, and this scares me. I live right next to a huge Jewish community. I love my neighbors. And the idea that if any American blood is shed in Israel, the backlash against my neighbors, I'm terrified for them. And they have a myriad of different opinions about Israel. Most American Jews do. It's like all over the map. You have people who, which is normal, which is how it should be, because they're American and they're allowed to have an opinion. They're not a hive mind, of course. People have different opinions about it. And to blame people for something that another government is doing is crazy, totally absurd. And there's, again, like, anti-Semitism doesn't need any help. It's always been there, and it's just going to get worse. And so, because all the conspiracy theories are rooted in it, and the far right is rooted in it. And that's ironic, because Fox tries to pretend that it's like super pro-Israel, and yet it does, promotes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories.
Yes. And
does things that I think are hideous. And like, even last year, this is so small, but it was something that it just made me very, very, very angry. PBS, because I always compare Fox to PBS, and PBS, I have far fewer hours because I only do 5 a week for PBS, and Fox, it will vary anywhere from 15 to 40. It's that bad some weeks. PBS had more segments that featured the families of the hostages than Fox did. So I'm like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And PBS is neutral, straight down the middle. They don't take a stand on it. They try to show both sides of it. People can criticize them if they like about that. It's a very divisive conflict, and I understand that. But the fact that PBS, honored these people more and tried to show them as human beings, and they do that with both sides. They try to show them as human beings, and Fox didn't even bother with the hostage. I was just like, no. Oh my goodness. And they don't show the anti-Bibi protests ever on Fox. No. They'll minimize them. They act like Bibi's beloved. And
but that is Israel's biggest problem, isn't it? It's similar to the Trump problem, is that, you've got somebody in the leadership who does not represent the people, who is also up for corruption charges, who doesn't want to go to prison, and is literally going to do anything to kind of stay in power. And this just goes back to what you said at the beginning, that Trump had to win this election because he didn't want to go to prison, because all of those cases were, there was just so much evidence against him that he really, he would not have been a free man right now if he hadn't have got the help that he did to win. We have to finish, but I'm so grateful to you, not just for this conversation, but for the effort that you put into watching Fox and exposing the propaganda. For now, Juliet Jeske, thanks for joining the Weekend Show.
Thank you.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News or by joining the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.